everyone. My name is Halima Siddiqui, and I'm a project coordinator here at Health Nexus. Health Nexus oversees several provincial initiatives related to FASD, the FASD provincial website where you can find recent and up-to-date information about what's happening, learn more about resources and tools, and find out services available in your local community. We also allocate subsidies every year to 40 plus support groups for individuals with FASD and their families. And we design an online training for service providers from various sectors, including healthcare and nursing, education, mental health and addictions, justice and corrections, and community and social work. Before we start the presentation, we would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, let's take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous people and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Today, we are welcoming three wonderful speakers. First, we have Rob McDonald. Rob is a community mental health coordinator for Starling Community Services in Waterloo Region, working in the Intensive Support and Resource Coordination Program. The program offers intensive case management and long-term service coordination for children and youth up to the age of 18 that require ongoing support to navigate multiple service systems. One impactful aspect of Rob's work is his involvement in FASD support groups, which provide a safe space for caregivers and adolescents affected by fetal alcohol spectrum disorder to share experiences and connect. These groups filled a long-standing service gap, receiving overwhelmingly positive feedback from the FASD community within the Waterloo region. Our other speaker is Melody Morton-Inumia, who is a faculty member in the Department of Health Sciences at Wilfrid Laurier University and holds a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Community-Driven Knowledge Mobilization and Pathways to Wellness, and leads the Interdisciplinary and Indigenous Pathways to Wellness Research Group. She's a bicultural Japanese and Swiss German Mennonite researcher and a parent to a young adult with FASD. She leads and contributes projects initiated and driven by organizations and communities in the area of community mental wellness, health and wellness asset mapping, and/or mental health addictions, disabilities, especially fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and healthy pregnancies. Melody also conducts research on research with a special focus on knowledge translation mobilization. We also have Carl, who is a young adult with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Carl is also a graduate of Southwood Secondary School in Cambridge that hopes to pursue a post-secondary education at Conestoga College in the fall. Carl is also a musician that enjoys playing guitar. He's also a former participant and co-facilitator for the FASD support group for adolescents. He's also a public speaker that enjoys sharing information about his personal experiences for the benefit of other youth with FASD. We are very thrilled to listen to their presentation. Please ask your questions in the Q&A session, and I'll provide more information and links in the chat if need be.
So today we're here to talk about the Waterloo Region FASD support group for adolescents. This group began in 2020, approximately 1 year after we started a group for caregivers. Both groups are hosted by Starling Community Services with funding and support from Health Nexus and the endorsement of Plexus, which is a collective of service providers in Waterloo Region that offer FASD specific programs and services. So I always like to begin this presentation with a quote that was taken from a group member during an evaluation that was conducted by Wilfrid Laurier University. And that quote can be found at the top of the screen, and it goes as follows. I love it. I feel so at home. I like it, when you can just be you and everyone kind of understands you. So I like this because I feel like it really encapsulates what we're trying to achieve with these support groups, whether we're talking about the caregiver group or the group for adolescents. And on the screen, there's a photo that was taken from one of our in-person events that took place last March. So in it, there are 9 youth group participants. 5 of those are co-facilitators for the group. And on either end of the photo, you can see me and one of my co-workers that provided support for the program. And sort of left of center, you can see Carl. So our stakeholders are as follows: Starling Community Services, which is the organization I work for, of course; Health Nexus, our funder; and Plexus, our collective of service providers that provide FASD specific supports. But also we have to include adolescents with FASD, as well as caregivers, supportive adults, and other family members that support the participants in the program. So I'll just provide some context for how the group came to be in the first place. So adolescents with FASD and their families have reported varying degrees of social isolation caused by a lack of understanding of the youth's disability from family members, educators, healthcare providers, and social service providers. The goal of the FASD support group for adolescents is to provide a forum for youth with FASD to meet one another, to learn from each other's shared experiences, and to establish a network of support that will ideally continue beyond the group and yield positive outcomes in the future. The objectives are: adolescents with FASD and their families will experience less social isolation. Adolescents with FASD and their families will increase and diversify their skills for managing daily stressors. And adolescents with FASD will increase their capacity for self-advocacy by gaining knowledge and insight into their diagnosis. The recruitment process is as follows. So every time we offer the group, and we are about to commence our next group during the first week of February. So this is actually a very intensive recruitment period for us. We notify former group members and their caregivers approximately 1 week before we announce it to the broader community. And when we do that, the intention is we want to retain the knowledge and experience that former group members have already gained, because there is an element of knowledge sharing and succession planning. So I'll get into this a little later on in the presentation, but a number of the group members are actually co-facilitators and will lead sessions. And so when they have the opportunity to do that, that is, of course, for the benefit of the other youth in the group, but also it's a great opportunity to practice public speaking, to talk about specific knowledge and experiences that the co-facilitator has learned themselves that they can share for the benefit of others. And for the other participants that are observing this in practice, we want them to see that it's entirely possible for them to assume the role of co-facilitator in the future. And so for that reason, we never want to kind of completely start with a blank slate. So there's always some element of former members returning, and then hopefully adding new participants as we grow and evolve. As I mentioned, the projects are announced and shared through our Plexus network, along with other external organizations and institutions. So examples would be our local Indigenous organizations, local hospitals, and even the French language school boards. I mentioned the French language school board specifically because our public and Catholic schools are a part of Plexus already. We do additional promotion through posting on social media platforms. And once we have families or youth that have expressed an interest in participating, we conduct virtual interviews as a part of the registration process. And really those registration meetings are intended to not only confirm eligibility, but to assess suitability and the level of comfort that the young person has being involved in a group of this nature, and also assessing how much support and engagement the parent or caregiver can provide as well, because there is a component that requires their participation. And to date, we've had 33 unique participants registered as group participants since we began in 2020. So the current model and structure of the group is as follows. It's a co-facilitation model that consists of an adolescent with FASD and a service provider that is knowledgeable about FASD supports and services. So typically, it is a youth that has been through the group at least once, often several times before they assume the role of being a co-facilitator. They would identify a topic a topic that applies to them specifically and would be relatable to other youth with FASD. And then in terms of the service provider, in the caregiver group, we've invited guest speakers to be a part of those sessions. But in the adolescent group, typically it's myself that is partnered with the youth co-facilitator. And so the youth co-facilitator will conduct a presentation based on their own knowledge and experience of a particular topic, and I supplement that with information about supports and services available locally that relate to that particular topic. Co-facilitators are encouraged to plan and facilitate an icebreaker activity and game for each of the virtual sessions. And the co-facilitators are compensated for their time and expertise with a $25 honorarium for preparing the presentation and another $25 honorarium when they present and facilitate the activities. So the group typically consists of virtual sessions as well as in-person events. So first I'll talk about what the virtual sessions entail. So they are co-facilitated by an adolescent with FASD and a service provider. These sessions are attended primarily by the adolescents themselves, although it's not uncommon for parents or caregivers or other supportive adults not to necessarily appear on screen with the youth, but they may be adjacent to them or in the same room where the youth is participating. Each session is 60 minutes, and so it consists of a 15-minute icebreaker. The presentation and group discussion is allotted 30 minutes, and then we always end every session with a game or a fun activity, which is an additional 15 minutes. So I've listed a number of topics and presentations that youth co-facilitators have presented on over the years. Some of these we've done more than once. And I think the takeaway from this slide is that there's a real wide range of topics, some that I think align with probably more traditional sorts of topics in the context of a support group. But then there are other topics such as the benefit of dance and learning how to play a musical instrument, the second of which was actually one of Carl's presentations, that really speak to day-to-day activities that play an important role in the youth's life. And within every one of those activities, there are special, unique circumstances that I think other youth with FASD can relate to, whether that means, the challenges associated with memory that may impact someone learning choreography for dance. Maybe it is the focus and like prolonged focus and attention on learning or practicing a musical instrument. or at a glance, sometimes like arts and crafts, that is a source of recreation, relaxation, and enjoyment for youth that often are juggling multiple stressors throughout the day. And so being able to talk about the things that they do to relax and feel good are just as important as learning, formal coping strategies. All right. As I mentioned, we bake in-person events to our schedule. And so these are co-hosted by myself and the event host. And in both cases, we are looking for places or people to act as an event host. We want to make sure that they have some knowledge of FASD and how to um, adapt activities to ensure that they're being delivered in a FASD informed manner. So these are attended by the adolescent participants as well as their parents and caregivers on a ratio of 1-to-1. So if we had two siblings in the group, we would ask that two parents or two caregivers join them for the activity. The events are 2 hours in duration, so they consist of a welcome, introduction, 15 minutes, the activity lasting up to an hour and a half, and then wrap up for the last 15 minutes. These in-person events are crucial for group participants and their caregivers to meet one another and to establish rapport. So the welcome and welcome back is designed to make caregivers feel more comfortable and to affirm that they will likely have a role to play in terms of helping the youth maintain contact with one another once the group has ended. So our overall goal is not necessarily to run a really effective support group, but our overarching goal is for youth to stay in contact with one another beyond the group. And often, because some youth may have a cell phone or may not be allowed to use social media, they are more dependent on their parents and caregivers to help facilitate that communication with other families. So it's very important that the caregivers understand that they are an extended member of this group. And we want to provide them with opportunities to observe the youth interacting with one another and witnessing firsthand who their child gets along with best. And then the parents can hopefully begin to imagine what it might look like beyond the group for those children to spend time together. And I also think it's important to mention that aside from trying to ensure that youth and families stay connected with one another beyond the group, from a liability perspective, this is a way to reduce some of the burden on Starling or the event host, because essentially we are asking the parent or caregiver to provide an element of supervision while the youth participates in the in-person event. And so I think that's important for other organizations or service providers that are considering how to use in-person events that may be more risk adverse and want to know how to do this feasibly. So on the screen, you can see a number of activities that we've hosted for the in-person events, along with the specific accommodations that we planned as a part of these activities. It's really important that we find activities that balance fun and excitement with an experiential learning component and parent engagement. So it's been a bit of a learning process, an evolution from where we began to where we are now. And as I said before, it's always important to ensure that the event hosts are able to offer accommodations that align with the needs of the group and its respective members. And to date, I would say the cooking class and a presentation slash meal that we had at the Crow Shield Lodge, which is an Indigenous organization. Those are the activities that elicited the most positive feedback from our members. So for this portion of the presentation, I'm going to ask questions of Carl, and Carl will read his responses. And when we get to the end of our presentation today, if people have additional questions or want Carl to elaborate on things that he talks about, then you'll have an opportunity to do so. So, Carl, why do you think we need a support group for youth with FASD?
The support group is a place to connect with other youth that have or had similar experiences as me. It is a good place to learn strategies and coping with symptoms of my diagnosis.
Thanks, Carl. Carl, what was it like when you first joined the support group in 2021?
I was very nervous at first because I didn't know any of the other members that were attending the group. And yes, I was a newbie. I did not know the rules for the group, but I was excited because I knew the co-facilitator, for example, Rob. I wanted to meet new people.
Thanks, Carl. Carl, why did you choose to become a youth co-facilitator in 2023? And what were some of your responsibilities?
I really liked the previous groups, and I wanted to continue meeting new people and learning about their experiences. I did a presentation called The Importance of Music and Learning to Play a Musical Instrument. It was much easier than I had expected.
Thank you. And why did you continue to return to the support group year after year until March 2025?
I looked forward to seeing people that I hadn't met in the previous groups, and I also enjoyed meeting new participants too. I really enjoyed their company and spending time with them.
Thank you. And you did numerous presentations, but did you have a favorite?
Yes, I did a presentation called The Value of Pets. I talked about my dog Diesel. I told the other group members about my feelings. I told them that my dog would make me feel better when I felt upset.
Thanks, Carl. So now, as a part of the presentation, I just wanted to include a few snapshots from the different activities that we've done throughout the years. So this one was taken from one of the cooking classes that I mentioned earlier. The cooking class is something we've probably done 4 or 5 times, and we offer these groups 2 times per year. We offer them October into November, and then again, February into March. So in this case, we're at the Kitchener Market in Kitchener, and you can see that there's caregivers with the youth preparing fajitas with instruction from Chef Nicole back in February of 2024. This is another set of photos from a Play with Clay event, and this is one we did in Cambridge. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Waterloo Region, and there's 3 main cities, Waterloo, Kitchener, and Cambridge. And so we try to spread out our activities across the 3 cities so that it's more equitable from families that may have to travel a little bit further than others. So this one was taken or conducted on November 2024. Okay, I wanted to speak to youth engagement and how important it is to this group. So in terms of how we ensure that there's a high level of youth engagement, we conduct a pre-group virtual meeting to discuss the structure, format, and content of the group. So we always want to make sure that the youth that are participating are making an informed decision when they provide consent to participate. And we always want to, I think when we talk about the structure, format, and content of the group, I think those are appealing aspects to the youth. Adolescents are assessed for group readiness and the level of engagement that they're prepared to engage in. So we do that with questions, just getting to know one another, finding about their interests, things that they find challenging. We talk about how often we'll be meeting. If I have information about age, sex of the other group members, I'll share that. And I also want to know from the youth that they are eager to meet other kids with a diagnosis of FASD and that they would be interested in staying in contact beyond the group if they meet someone that they want to get to know better. The adolescents are invited to suggest topics for presentations and group discussions. So while the co-facilitators select their own topics for their particular session, I'm always interested in looking at interests that might trend. So if we have a number of youth that are identifying a particular topic, then that tells me I need to prioritize that and look within our co-facilitation team to see if there's anyone that has experience with that would be comfortable talking about it. Adolescents are invited to assume the role of co-facilitating a session or leading an icebreaker or game if they are comfortable in doing so. So if we have a youth that identifies that there's some degree of interest in being a co-facilitator, but maybe they're nervous or apprehensive about doing it, I will invite them to either do a presentation, or they could just do an icebreaker activity, or they could do a game, or any combination or all three. What's more important is that they just get the opportunity to practice it. And often if they only want to do one of the three activities, I don't think there's been anyone yet that's done one of them and then didn't feel comfortable assuming more responsibility in the future. So I see it as potentially being a gradual process, not necessarily an all or nothing sort of situations. And then adolescents and their caregivers participate in a post-group virtual meeting to share feedback about their experience and to complete an online survey for Health Nexus. Youth are invited to identify other group participants that they would like to remain in contact with beyond the support group sessions. And so obviously that question is asked of all the participants separately. And then I act as a matchmaker when two adolescents identify each other. So the eagerness to stay in touch is reciprocal. I will introduce their parents and caregivers via email, and then I delegate any further efforts to keep the youth in touch with one another. That is delegated to their respective families. As I mentioned, caregiver engagement is a crucial component of the group. So in those initial virtual meetings, caregivers are also assessed for their capacity to provide support, as well as their level of commitment to accompany youth to the in-person events, to participate in the post-group matching processes, and to nurture the friendships between the youth beyond the scope of the support group. Caregivers are also invited to participate in the post-group virtual meeting to share their own feedback. So I'm looking for things like the day, the time of day that the groups took place. Is there anything we can do to potentially remove barriers in the future? Things of that nature. And caregivers are also asked to affirm that they are willing and capable of facilitating contact between youth participants beyond the scope of the support group, especially for the youth that don't have the means to do so on their own. In terms of our budget and how it's allotted, you can see from the screen that the majority of our budget goes towards the in-person events. We do offer honorariums to train adolescent co-facilitators. paying for their time to prepare a presentation, and of course, providing them with another honorarium when they deliver that presentation. Uh, and then we have like some basic program supplies and infrastructure costs. I'll wrap up my portion of this presentation with a few of the miscellaneous benefits that have come from the group. So on the screen is a piece of art that was contributed to the CanFASD art contest back in 2023. So she was one of our adolescent co-facilitators named Michaela. And our group is a great way to get information out directly to the youth, rather than hoping that information about things like the CanFASD art contest find their way to the youth through service providers who relay it to parents and caregivers who then talk about it with the youth. So in addition to our support group topics and games and activities, whenever there's information about local programs, or in this case, even like national programs, we always facilitate conversations with the youth about that. And if they're really interested in, in pursuing something, then I will follow up with the families to provide more detailed information about it. This picture is very meaningful for me in particular. So Anthony, who's the youth in the picture, is a former adolescent co-facilitator for our group. So he is one of our original participants and continued to stay involved with the group for a number of years, and acted as a mentor to a number of young newer members. And in 2025, when we were looking around our community for event hosts, we approached the Crow Shield Lodge Indigenous organization. And really, by luck and coincidence, Anthony was a co-op student there. And so Anthony was able to participate as an alumni of our group, and was a guest speaker that spoke in addition to the Indigenous speakers for the event. Anthony is of Indigenous descent himself, and so this is him making cedar tea, and he also led our group through a smudging process, and then finished up by just talking about how the support that he received through the FASD support group intersected with the supports that he accesses through the Crow Shield Lodge. So it was a beautiful thing. And our final photo is of Carl. This was the same event at Crow Shield Lodge. And sometimes when we ask the youth to identify things that they want to do for our in-person activities, we get so many different suggestions that it's hard to find time for everything. So in this case, we had a number of group members that could play musical instruments. And so we allotted a certain amount of time to have a talent show of sorts to close out our group together. So this is a photo of Carl playing music for our group. What you can't see is all the other group members, their families, the service providers, and our hosts at Crow Shield Lodge as Carl's audience when he played for everyone. So now I'll mute myself and I will turn it over to Melody for her portion of the presentation. And Melody, you can just let me know when you want me to switch slides.
Great, thank you. And hello, everybody. Thank you, Rob and Carl, for sharing so far. So I'm a faculty member who has opportunities to supervise undergrad and master's and PhD, so forth, students, but in particular, there are a lot of undergraduate students in our program looking for opportunities to do applied research for their undergrad thesis or for directed studies. And when there's a match between a very strong student or strong students with a short-term project by an organization or a group, sometimes when the stars align, we can do these things in partnership without having to look for additional funding. So I've worked with Rob in the past, and so when he reached out saying, "Is there a chance that you have any students that could do a short study in the next year on this initiative that we have going here so that they could have evidence-based findings when applying for further funding?" It's very hard for me to say no to FASD related projects that are feasible. And so we agreed to do it. And I think we spent parts of spring, summer term sort of thinking through what this would look like so that we could hit the ground running in September, which is when students usually come back for coursework. So we were able to design and develop a short study that includes what you see on the slide there. So there is a short online survey that were circulated with the caregivers or parents of the youth, asking them a bit more about what they think or understand are their reasons for wanting to be part of their group and their expectations. And then partway through, like just past the halfway mark of the support group series, there was like a facilitated focus group. And because Rob knows everybody really well and people are comfortable talking to Rob, he asked the questions and with permission from all of the youth, recorded their responses to include as part of our analysis. But the majority of the data that we were working with came from both the focus group, but then after all the sessions were done, asking if any of the youth were willing to be part of an interview or a chat, a conversation about their experiences and reflections, as well as with some of the caregivers and parents. But we also wanted to include Rob because as the sort of organizer of the group, there might be things that he could speak to that wouldn't be well reflected in the youth and their caregiver or parents' perspectives. Thank you. So when we were analyzing the information that was shared during the brief survey at the front end, the focus group in the middle, and the conversation type interviews afterwards, we thematically organized what people were saying around their motivations, their experiences, successes, challenges, their lessons learned, things that they benefited, whether they anticipated it or not, and recommendations they have for future peer support groups. So what I'm going to do in the next two slides is just give key finding highlights with excerpts from what people shared. So I'm just going to walk you through. There's 6 key findings, and then I'm going to just give you a brief list of the recommendations that people put forward. They're not our recommendations. It was coming straight from the people that were part of the peer support group or were parents or caregivers. The first point was, the key finding was, participants felt supported. The youth expressed that they felt very supported by the other participants and the group coordinator, aka Rob. And I think the excerpt you see there, I love it. It feels so at home. I like it. You know, when you can just be you and everyone kind of understands you. I think that was Rob's opening quote, which I had also selected to speak to that point. The second key finding was that the co-facilitation role and responsibility instilled confidence and leadership in the youth, like Carl. So having peer-led co-facilitators in this group actually concretely fostered skills in leadership, confidence, being responsible for leading parts or whole sessions, having patience, and like practicing and learning and improving presentation skills. And one of the youth said, I think it would be good for younger ones, referring to like younger youth in the group, to realize that like it's okay. Like if she can do it, I can do it. I think if I could motivate the kids to not let anything get to them. So just sort of thinking through being a role model and thinking, I was encouraged to become a co-facilitator because I saw someone else do it and now I'm doing that and I want to encourage the next generation to take on that kind of role. The third key finding was around the social piece, which I know Rob has spoken about, and Carl too, promoting connections. So we asked the youth to rate their experience on a scale of 1 to 10, and everyone rated it 9 or 10. And you can see lower down that one said, I would rate it 11 out of 10, honestly. But if that's the maximum amount, I would say 10. And youth consistently said that they looked forward to weekly sessions because they could make friends and talk to new people without feeling judged. The fourth key finding was that youth gained insight on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and new strategies. They felt like they gained more knowledge about FASD and strategies to deal with challenges. Youth talked about that there was variation and differences between people, but also some similarities, and that was helpful to understand. And so one person said, it helped me understand my diagnosis more, like how to deal with things and like how to process emotions. A fifth key finding was real change being observed in the youth or adolescents' daily lives. So this would come more from like the caregivers and parents who said they noticed like concrete changes in the ways people were exuding their attitudes, the language they were using, and their overall composure and more confidence. So the youth became more accepting of themselves and the diagnosis and were more confident in talking about themselves and FASD. And a quote is another skill that I have learned is taking care of the way you say things and making it appropriate instead of making it inappropriate. So the real change, I almost feel like I need to qualify too. That wasn't only coming from caregivers and parents, but also the youth were observing changes in themselves. And then the last key finding is a positive and supportive group coordinator is essential. So this in this case, it's Rob, and the way that Rob was communicating with the youth was very supportive, motivating, and engaging. And I feel like maybe you can sense that in just the way Rob conducts himself. And so someone said, Rob is very supportive, understanding. He made the group very fun. Everybody is very fun. Everything, I have no complaints. So overall, people had a very positive experience. And the last slide, before we have an opportunity for people to ask questions or have them answered, is there were a number of recommendations, and we sort of grouped them together. And the recommendations you see on this slide are mostly coming from youth, I think, except for number 5, which would have come from mostly caregivers and parents themselves. So number 1, people really like connecting with other people. So they would love to see more in-person events, but I also know that comes at like an actual cost, usually a financial one. The second one is more weeks for the support group. I think people just really like it and would love to have just a little bit more time if possible. The recreational events, in other words, the in-person events, would love to see it be longer if possible. Number 4 was having a support group available throughout the year. I think you can sense like a theme here. People just want more because they enjoyed it so much. But also, I think some of the underlying thought behind number 4 was also if there was a way to have more, like a support group ongoing throughout the year, that it would give an opportunity for more people to be able to benefit from the support group. The 5th was increased caregiver involvement, because at this point, as Rob explained, the caregivers or parents mostly have their time to meet other caregivers and other youth at the in-person events, which happens twice in a series. And some said increasing the responsibility on co-facilitators, such as mentoring younger youth. So it's not necessarily in co-facilitating the exact sessions, but maybe having other opportunities for mentorship. That's what we have prepared. So I think at this point, I'm not sure how it normally gets facilitated, but we're entering into the comments and Q&A period now.
So the first question is here. I'm curious to know why the French language school board is not part of Plexus.
So I'll answer that. They haven't expressed an interest in being a part of Plexus. The other piece is Plexus consists of service providers that provide something that's very specific to FASD, not necessarily that they offer like an accommodated version of a program that serves all students, when we're talking about school boards. So the public board actually runs an FAS, like a secondary school classroom for students with FASD. So that is the service that they provide. And with the Catholic board, they provide specialized training for FASD. So those are things that those school boards provide specifically. But we don't have the French language school board providing something FASD specific at this time.
Thank you for that, Rob. Once again, I see a couple people, I think, raising their hands. But if to have a question answered, please put it in the Q&A tab. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So yeah, any questions you have, please put it over there. Another question we have here is, this may have been covered, so I'm sorry if I missed it, but what ages is the group open to? Also, how often does the group meet and how many meetings are there?
So the age group is 12 to 17 years old. But if the youth celebrate their 18th birthday over the course of the group, then that's fine. That wouldn't preclude them from participating. The number of sessions has varied from year to year. This year, we're doing 2 6-week groups. So of the 6-week group, 4 of those are virtual sessions and 2 are in-person events. And it's structured as 2 virtual in-person event, followed by 2 additional virtual sessions in-person event. And as I said before, we offer that 6 weeks starting in October into November, and again, February into March.
Someone asked, can participants be outside of the Waterloo region?
No, not at this time anyway. And the rationale for that is because we talk about supports and services that are local to FASD. So when I'm talking about programs or services that might supplement. So let's imagine one of the youth is talking about like a horseback riding program that's offers accommodations to adapt it for youth with FASD. Then as a part of that presentation, I would provide information about the organization that offers that particular program and maybe a contact person for parents and caregivers to speak with specifically. So everything is, I hate to keep using the word specific, but everything is very specific to Waterloo Region.
Another question we have here is, what would you suggest as first steps or a starting point to get a group for adolescents started? It would be a scenario where there wouldn't be the benefit of youth co-facilitators yet.
Yeah, and in our first year, we didn't use co-facilitators, youth co-facilitators. So that was something that evolved in the second year. And so in terms of how I got started, I had the benefit in my day-to-day role as a service coordinator. I have a number of youth and families affected by FASD on my caseload. So I knew what some of the common challenges or issues were that both were being described by the youth and their parents and caregivers. Number one being social isolation. So essentially, I just needed to have a space where I was permitted to introduce these youth to one another that were so eager to expand their network of friends. And so it's also worth noting, like, this happened during the pandemic. So most supports and services had pivoted to being offered virtually. So it was very easy to set up a Zoom meeting, register youth with an FASD diagnosis, and then just give them the opportunity to talk to one another in a facilitated sort of way, a facilitated and structured way. So I'm not sure if that answers your question entirely, but I would say it's a lot easier than one might expect. All you need is a virtual conferencing software, some youth to participate, an FASD informed coordinator, and the willpower to do it.
Thank you, Rob. The next question here is, it would be nice to have FASD groups for adults. Would you be developing for adults?
No, and the reason for that is because the service mandate for my organization is for children and youth. So we stop service technically at 18. In the past, we've talked about partnering with Sunbeam Developmental Resource Center, which serves individuals with disabilities, both children and youth and adults. So we've talked about the possibility of partnering with them in order to create a group for young adults, but that's just something that hasn't come to fruition. I think it's worth noting that like I have a regular 9 to 5 position as a service coordinator, and this is something I do in addition to that role. So I've got lots of great ideas for ways to expand it. But at the end of the day, there's constraints with my own time and funding.
How important is it to have lived experience senior mentors to chat directly with the young adults or youth?
I would say very important. And this might actually be a question that Carl might want to weigh in on. Um, so, like when Carl began as a participant initially, he had the benefit of watching this established group sort of work the way it was intended to. And then I introduced the idea to Carl about becoming a co-facilitator, and Carl was very eager to do that. Carl is a very outgoing individual. He's a real people person, and very comfortable chatting with participants of all ages. So maybe I'll ask you, Carl, and you can speak to the other people in the meeting. How important do you think it is for you to teach and help other kids become comfortable in becoming co-facilitators?
Honestly, I would say that it's very important to help teach other people how important it is to like join in and co-facilitate. The other things, wait, what was the question again? Sorry.
Well, just when you think about you started as a participant and you watched other older kids be co-facilitators, when it was time and I offered you the opportunity to do that, you were excited about doing it. And then you started doing it, and then other younger kids got to watch you do it, and then they became interested. So I think we've sort of talked about why it's important.
Yeah, it's to like to show people that sometimes you're going to need some leadership, and sometimes you'll be there to like sit and listen and to understand and to see how it goes and if it would interest you.
Yeah, and not that we would discourage it, but there's no real constructive criticism of the youth that are acting as co-facilitators. Like if you think about high school kids giving a presentation, like in class, often the people that are observing it are just glad it's not them up there because it seems so nerve-wracking. But in our group, not only is the co-facilitator well supported by myself and their family in terms of developing what they're going to be talking about. If they are nervous about public speaking, I will speak as much as they would like me to. And then we go around and everyone in the group, this is also important. Our group maxes out at 10 participants. So every time we ask a question or we want to give feedback, we directly ask each participant. They can choose whether they share feedback or not. But I would say more often than not, they share positive feedback. So it is I don't think Carl, you would say that you were ever felt attacked or embarrassed by the things you shared. Everyone was really supportive of one another.
Yeah, I
Right?
never felt embarrassed or attacked.
Yeah.
Another thing I'm gonna add to this is when if you guys do and end up doing these support groups, any other people, do like try to encourage them, but if they really do not want to do the co-facilitating, then that's basically if they don't want to, they don't have to.
Melody, I have a question here for you. How do you suggest the research findings be used to encourage replication of this group in other regions or with other demographics, such as adults with FASD?
Mm. Well, I think one of them is learning from Rob and Carl and so forth. But one of the commitments we made was to also publish. So we have submitted like we described the program, the ways in which we studied it, and the key findings to a journal, so that it will be open access for anyone to read as people might be looking for what's out there and learn from the strengths and like things that people are thinking would make it even better from the work that Rob and Carl and others have been doing. So that's one effort we're making. But I think, events like this webinar also sort of get it out there, and we presented at the Canada FASD Research Network conference, just kind of putting it out there about what it is, what has been found. And so I think that's one of the few different avenues that we're using to sort of get it out there and encourage people to think about how they can incorporate it. And I don't think it has to necessarily exist in the very model with the same kind of service organization that Rob works with him. I think it could be embedded in other spaces and just sort of use the core tenets of what's worked here and make it work in other places, probably.
I think this question is kind of related. Coming from a school board, is this something that can be carried out by a school board? What are some things that you would what are some things what are some things would you highlight if so, or think it would be important to capture? Sorry, I think that second part of the question, there was a typo. So what are some things that you would highlight or think it would be important to capture for school board?
I think first and foremost, like I always tell people, the topics that the youth select are secondary to the experience. The priority needs to be just creating a space or a forum for youth with FASD to meet one another. Like you could really talk about anything. Of course, there are benefits to, looking at discussing the diagnosis in more detail or talking about programs and services that they find really beneficial. But really, I don't sweat the topics themselves too much, because as long as we're playing games and finding ways for the youth to exchange information with one another, or exchange information about themselves with one another, that's the most important thing. And like that can happen in a lunchroom, that can happen in between breaks or recess, nutrition breaks, whatever you call them these days. Because also interestingly, a lot of youth with an FASD diagnosis have challenges with unstructured time. So if you could open up a classroom for these youth to spend time together, play games, or like I said, just facilitate a conversation between them, I think those are all very feasible activities.
If more local groups do get formed, would you be open to integrating or collaborating with them on certain events?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I'm not sure if you mean like other FASD groups, like if they were created in other communities, would we collaborate with one another? I think the answer to that is of course. That opportunity has never been presented to me before, but honestly, I am a big fan of trying things. I would rather try and then learn from things that, we would do differently in the future, rather than being risk adverse and not doing it at all. and like I'm sure my contact information will go out with this presentation. So if anyone wants to talk about like the very specific details of what we do and how we do it, I'm happy to share that. I'm an open book and want to encourage these groups to form elsewhere. And if there are other groups that want to collaborate, then by all means reach out to me, and I'd love to talk about it. That's a good idea, eh, Carl?
Yeah.
Good.
We have a comment/question here. Thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. I've really enjoyed it and picked up some great ideas. I've worked as a service provider for teens also, and I love this idea of creating community and connection after the events. Do you create events for them to reconnect or leave that to the parents to maintain the connection?
I leave it to the parents for the most part. Now, when we offer subsequent registrations and group members return, as a part of their virtual registration, I'll often ask, hey, did you ever stay in touch with so-and-so that you wanted to connect with at the last group? And then we try to use that information to figure out, were there any barriers that we didn't anticipate to youth staying in touch with one another? And so sometimes I'll troubleshoot that with the families, because, you know, everyone's really busy, and often youth with FASD are connected to various supports and services. So families, if they don't have a formal case manager or service coordination, are juggling a lot of balls at once. So I just try to use what I know about what exists in the community and what I know about the youth that have been through the group to help families plan events, but I don't oversee them myself.
I'm going to combine these two questions together. What day and time are the sessions, and is there a cost to participants?
There is no cost. Everything is 100% funded by Health Nexus, thankfully. Um, and in terms of when we offer them, the virtual sessions take place on Thursday evenings, 6:30 to 7:30. So families have said that after dinner is an ideal time. And it doesn't run so late that it disrupts like bedtime routines, things like that. I'd say one of the challenges associated with offering a group at that time is for the youth that may take medication to treat symptoms of ADHD related to their diagnosis. Medications are often wearing off in the evening hours, but we take that into account, and we're extra flexible and patient. So those are the virtual sessions. If families don't want in-person events to take place on weekday evenings, so we always plan those for the weekends, and we typically do those in the early afternoon. One, so that things aren't too rushed in the morning, and two, again, for youth that may take medications to help treat some of the symptoms, they're experiencing the full benefit of their medications during that time.
How do you teach group participants about their diagnosis? Do you have specific tools you use, or is it a more casual conversation?
It is a more casual conversation. Usually, our first session of each group will be the topic will be understanding FASD, and each youth co-facilitator that's done that has taken a slightly different approach. Our most recent one was a young man who put together a little video presentation. But the so the initial information about FASD that sort of kicks off the group comes from the youth co-facilitator, him or herself. So it's in that individual's words. And then I supplement with, I guess, like factual information. We don't, at the end of the day, we want the sessions to be fun and engaging. And so it's important that we provide an overview of FASD because we're going to be talking about FASD in some capacity every single session. So the youth need like a basic foundation for having those conversations. But we, you know, we don't delve into like really detailed information. More of an overview, I guess.
Perfect. And just like that, we are at the end of our time. So thank you so much, Carl, Rob, Melody, for joining us today and presenting on this wonderful topic. So stay tuned, everyone, for more webinars by Health Nexus, and take care.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Carl.
Thank you.